So it's a great honor for me to be part of this conversation. And so how it's going to break down is I'm going to introduce the panelists. They will have 15 minutes to speak and tell their story, and then we will have about 15 minutes for questions afterwards. So just for those process people, that's how it's going to work today. So briefly, these are our panelists for today. We are going to be hearing from Colleen Waxer and from Jasper, Alberta. And as a director of the Municipality of Jasper's Community and Family Services Department since 1986, Kathleen Waxer is responsible for the operations of SCSS, Community Outreach Services, Child Care Services, Community Development, and Disaster Social Services. So Kathleen, do you want to raise your hand? No, you just wait. Yeah, perfect, okay. And then next we have Michelle Neviandami, Assistant Director of the Edmonton Native Healing Center. Michelle has been involved in community development, particularly around health and wellness, for at least 10 years. She's Assistant Director of the Edmonton Native Healing Center and is engaged in other community initiatives. She's passionate about social justice, fitness, and community. Michelle, wave your hand. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Why wouldn't they be there? Why am I surprised when they wave their hands? They haven't gone anywhere. Okay, Chris Elmer from Urban Systems from Sylvan Lake, Alberta. Chris has a strong passion for healthy and resilient communities, and he leads through building collaborative processes that incorporate multisectoral partnerships to address community challenges at a systematic level. It's a mouthful, Chris. I'm excited to hear from you. And Adrienne Sprecher from an early learning consultant from Northern Lights Public Schools. She has 23 years of experience in the field of education. Over the past 6 years, she has worked supporting teachers, educational assistants, and students with specialized programming supports. And I just want to say she's a mother, wife, and a volunteer, and believes in the importance of giving back to the community, which is obviously a key theme for today. So those are your panelists. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite them up. First one up, according to where they're sitting. So yay. So first one up. Chris, come on up. And I have my signs. And remember, what does this mean? You look Blackfoot.
Get out of here. You're done. So I'm glad I have the stop sign. We all remember the dolls that you used to pull the string and the doll started talking. My wife tells me that I have a string, but it's in the front. And I can just keep pulling it and pulling it and pulling it. So the stop sign is critically important for me. Otherwise, I will blather on for the rest of today. But thank you very much for the invite. It is a great pleasure to come talk about multi-sectoral collaboration. We do not have enough of these conversations. And what a wonderful bio you wrote for me. It's like you knew all about my history right off the top of your head. It's just fabulous. So I work for a company called Urban Systems. We are a traditional consulting company that does planning and engineering, landscape architecture, all kinds of things that municipalities need. What we realized as we were going through what we're working on with municipalities all over the place is that ultimately what we're dealing with is complex. And what we're trying to solve complexity with is very simple-minded solutions. So we are wired as humans to be problem solvers. And in order to solve problems, we design solutions in a very linear fashion. We need 5 steps in order to achieve sustainability, or we create some ridiculous sentence that says we can actually solve this problem just by going through this simple process. But the reality is when we're dealing with complexity, we're dealing with all of these different interdependencies that cross all types of sector boundaries. And when we're just talking to local government, all local government thinks about is what can I solve, but they're delusional in thinking that everything is in that box that they can solve. And so we ignore all of these different potential collaborations with all of these other sectors because there's no way that anybody, any one organization or any one sector can solve all of these issues. So if we're talking about poverty, if we're talking about homelessness, if we're talking about volatile local economy, no one organization, no one sector can actually tackle that challenge all on their own. So that when we start to acknowledge that we are dealing in complex situations, we realize that we need multiple sectors at the table to actually talk about this. So what this did is it spawned our second company called Urban Matters. So this is our social enterprise. This is our organization that is designed to deal with some of these challenges at a much different level than what we could through our traditional consulting model. So we created its own social enterprise, and our purpose is to look for ways that we can get social returns in our investment in our business. So it's not just going out, and it's not just doing projects, and it's not just achieving these outcomes that we've predicted that we can. What it's actually looking at is what is the impact of our work across multiple spectrums? How are we seeing changes in the societies that we're actually working in so that we can start to see broad return on investment to the community, not just through the business side of things? So it's a unique structure. It's a community contribution model. It's a new incorporation model that was created in BC, and it's designed to say we are a business. We're not afraid of making profit. But what we do with our profit is reinvest back in the social mandate and the social cause that we created our business for. So as we proceed with our business Urban Matters, 60% of our profitability must be reinvested back into the communities we work with, back into the social challenges that we're attempting to solve. And ultimately, we created this because change is really hard. So most of you have probably tried some form of change in the communities you work in the practices that you work in, and you recognize that change is hard. We want to be really visionary. We want to aspire to achieve something. We want to aspire to achieve some radical change, some radical transformation. But sometimes we overly focus on that, and we ignore what our current reality is. So we need to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves about where we stand in our current reality, where our history has brought us to today to actually tackle that challenge we're trying to deal with. If we aren't ruthlessly honest about that current reality, all we look for is some aspirational vision that we're never going to achieve. So it's this dynamic tension that we're always working with, and how do we want to get to this vision by recognizing where we are actually starting from. And when we lie to ourselves, what we're doing is essentially saying, let's just ignore all the real problems that we're dealing with and just pretend it's going to be a little bit easier to achieve that vision. So what we do, and this is a great tagline for consultants, is we come in and we tell you how horrible you are. We tell you how horrible your situation is. And we help you come to that realization and help you get to the notion that it's okay. It's okay that your situation isn't as good as you thought it is, because we need to understand where we actually start from in order to achieve or to realistically set that vision. So that all sounds great, but what the hell do you actually do? That's always the question we get. Well, what are you doing about it? So when we created this community contribution company and we created this social enterprise, part of what we wanted to achieve was more social ventures, more social enterprises. So we aren't out there doing it. We're trying to convene and facilitate the conversation to get more people out there doing it. So what we started was basically an incubation process. So we started to find like-minded people who are out there trying to create businesses that were making social change. And so we started, from a ventures perspective, we created Universal Access Design, or we helped incubate Universal Access Design. So it's a gentleman who's a quadriplegic who works with communities, with organizations, with private sector businesses around actually making sure that all buildings are universally accessible to everybody of all physical abilities. We created Canoe, which is an Indigenous Innovation Society, which is going into Indigenous communities and promoting how to you create your own social enterprises to build employment, to build social capacity within your own communities. We created Ogo Car Share Co-op, which is just as it sounds, a car share co-op in Kelowna. And we created Purple, Purposeful People. So it was a gentleman who came from the tech industry who was all about acceleration of technological companies. And he took that concept and he said, well, why can't we apply that to social enterprise? So he's applying the whole notion of acceleration in business to the social enterprise side of things and helping those social entrepreneurs actually build their business more sustainably and profitably. In terms of actual work that we're doing on the collaboration side, we're working in the poverty sector. We're working with the Central Alberta Poverty Reduction Alliance in and around Red Deer, and working with all of the social services agencies and bringing local government in to have real conversations about what can we actually do in order to move the dial on poverty in the region. We're talking about affordable housing, and this is an issue that affects every community across not only our province, but ultimately across our nation. And so how are we actually tackling this and recognizing that government has a role to play, but sometimes government needs to get the hell out of the way? And so how do we bring the different sectors together to talk about what can government do to facilitate this? What can the social service agencies do? And ultimately, how do we mobilize private sector capital to actually tackle this? Because nobody wants to take this on by themselves. The development community won't because there's not enough money in it. Local government won't because they can't. And the social services sectors are always dealing with stumbling blocks around getting funding. So how do we get them all together? We all want the same things. How do we tackle this from a collective perspective? The opioid crisis is something that we're seeing all over the place, all across North America, let alone our own province. So again, working with not only the not-for-profit and social sectors, but bringing government along as well, and bringing the health sector in. How do we tackle this so that no individual is trying to go out and try to create a strategy on their own to deal with something that is so complex as opioid addictions? The climate change and renewable energy, we're working with the Energy Futures Lab, which is a giant national cross-sector collaboration dealing with something that is probably the most complex challenge that we're dealing with today as a planet. So this starts to really reflect the nature of complexity and how we all need to recognize all of the different interdependencies that go into talking about something as significant as climate change. And then finally, on the concept of community economic development, just to parrot a little bit about what Tracy was talking about earlier, but all the different aspects of our local economy. So we're seeing in Alberta, municipalities particularly are being affected with the transition away from coal and coal-fired electricity plants. And so when you have a community of 2,500 that says the next day, realize that 290 jobs are disappearing, how do we tackle that? And how do we acknowledge the complexity of that type of initiative around what do we do? How do we actually deal with changing this community? How do we actually deal with, we're not going to go out, Amazon headquarters isn't looking to Eastern Alberta to relocate there. So we're not replacing 300 jobs from one industry to go find the next industry to bring 300 new jobs in. So how do we address that at the local level? How do we get the different sectors involved to actually tackle some of these challenges? Whew. 5 minutes left. Okay, I will do my best. 15 minutes and 3 slides. That is super constraining to somebody who can pull his own string and just talk and talk and talk. Now I've just blown 30 seconds. So we talk about, it was asked, what are the challenges? There's nothing but challenges in dealing with multi-sector collaboration. But the way we've approached it is that all of these challenges are opportunities. And the opportunity is to continue the dialogue. Tracy commented to me earlier this morning, said, your patience is amazing. And I laughed because my patience is horrible. But the only way this works is patient dialogue and continuing to show up and continuing to have the conversation. We are all resistant to change. Sometimes it's fear. We don't know what's coming. Sometimes it's threat because the change means, well, that might impact my organization, it might impact my employment. So that threat is real. We need to acknowledge that. And there's a discomfort that comes with that. So when we come in and push change, and we got to collaborate, we got to do this, when it's all different, it's all uncomfortable, well, no wonder there's pushback and there's resistance to that. Ultimately, we need to get away from predictable outcomes or focus on predictable outcomes. That's a linear thought process, and we want to say, funders want to say, tell me what the outcome is of your project. And it's as if I can predict the future. And we need to get away from that model because the collaboration is a process. And we need to move from the project mentality to the process mentality. And when we talk about the linear type of thinking, what we're looking at is we want it to be predictive. We want you to predict the future for me. We want it to be formalized. I want you to translate everything into a process that I understand. And ultimately, it's very objective. So it's people like me, the consultants who fly in, who don't really have a stake in the problem, who are creating a magical solution for you. It has to be with you. This needs to change because complexity is all about everything's emergent It's new. We don't know what it's going to be. Everything changes as new information comes in. As information flows in, now we've got something new that's emerged that we hadn't contemplated or we hadn't pretended we could predict before. And we need to adapt. When that new information comes in, we need to be adaptive in order to change course away from that magical 5-step process that we thought was going to get us to that outcome. So ultimately, this is a big stretch that we're asking of a lot of people. This is a big stretch from what are typically we like to do. We like to be in silos. We like to be in our own organizations, and we like to have our own strategy to solve the problem. But when we have 5 different organizations all with their own strategies to solve the same problem, we start to see a lot of the inefficiencies there. So how do we get those 5 agencies to actually talk together about coming up with a collective solution, working with the people that are actually affected by the decision makers? And so this all goes back to when we're sitting, and I won't name the community, it wasn't in Alberta anyway, so I doubt they're in the room, but we're sitting there talking to them about their homelessness strategy and how great this strategy was and how great this outcome was going to be as they moved towards solving homelessness. And they had this wonderful committee, and they had this great group of people, all well-intentioned, and a simple question was, how many homeless people are sitting on your committee? And the answer inevitably was 0. And if we aren't including those people that are actually affected by the challenge you're trying to solve, we're not getting all of the information. And as Tracy said, who's missing from the table? That's usually the first one that's missing. It's someone like me sitting in a suit who has never actually dealt with the problem that I'm pretending I know everything about. So that's part of this multi-sector collaboration, is actually getting the people who are part of it on a day-to-day basis to be part of the decision that needs to be made. 1 minute left. Okay, so I'm actually ahead of schedule, which I'm amazed by. But this requires a shift in mindset. And this is kind of my closing story that makes fun of me mostly. And if the mindset doesn't change, we just look at tool. We always want the tool. What's the easy way? What's the next thing? What's the thing I can do to change this? So I turned 40 a while ago. And when I turned 40, I said to my wife, when I'm 45, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. Yes, that's the proper response. That was the response she gave to me. Laughter. No way. So I turned 41, and how's it going? Oh, it's good. I got lots of time. 42, oh, it's good. I got lots of time. So I turned 43, and she said, how's it going? And I said, it's great. I got a Fitbit. The Fitbit is going to change everything for me. And then I turned 44, and she said, how's it going? And I threw the Fitbit on the ground. I said, it's great. It tells me every day exactly how lazy I am. The moral of the story is the tool will not change. Unless your mindset is willing to change, nothing's going to change. Right on time.
Right on time, thank you. So we're gonna have Michelle now from the Edmonton Native Healing Center up. Do you have a PowerPoint?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, next one up.
All right, well, good morning. It's really good to be here. I'm honored to be able to share one of my passions in life. I believe physical activity is really an opportunity to bring community together. And I think when we talk and we look at community, collaboration is a must. So I work at Edmonton Native Healing Center. I've been there for 16 years now, so I feel like I've been there for a very long time. And I also have my own business, which is called Esqueo Health. So Esqueo in Cree means woman. So my really focus has been women and children and / families fit in there as well. So I am a Cree. I'm a member of Kwakatoos First Nation in Saskatchewan, so I honor my roots and I honor the teachings that have come across my way. And I think that there's a gift our Indigenous people bring to the table, and particularly this. I'm really honored to be able to share my experiences. So my PowerPoint is more pictures. I believe pictures speak 1,000 words, and so I've collected a lot of pictures along my way of the community, the women, the children that I've worked with. So once that gets up and running, We'll have some pictures. So growing up, I really credit my passion for fitness and physical activity to my mom. She was a role model. I remember just constantly seeing her exercise, have Jane Fonda on the TV. I'm like, what is she doing? And not really knowing. Thank you, there we go. And then I remember we lived not too far away from the reserve. So we lived very close to White Bear Reservation, and that's not my community, but that's my grandparents seemed to set down roots there. So we went there every summer and winter, and I remember in the summers, my mom would get on her bike, and it was an hour and a half car ride. My mom would get on her bike, her 10-speed, and ride her bike to the res from our home city. And I was just like, she's crazy. This woman's crazy. So I just really, really remember her being this role model. So this is me a couple of years ago. So my mom constantly put me and my siblings in physical activities like track, like cheerleading, like just different dance. So I was always engaged in physical activity. But it was ultimately because of my mom. She planted this seed. She planted this fire of wellness and movement. And later on, my first teachings, when I really engaged with culture and listening to the teachings of our elders, because there was a period in my life where I really wanted nothing to do with culture and who I was as an Indigenous person. But when I started to really listen to the elders, one of the very first teachings that was dropped in my world was this. The elder said, there's two gifts that the Creator has given to us, the gift of breath and the gift of movement. And so when she said that just kind of ignited this fire within me, this gift of movement. What do I do with that? So as I've been at Edmonton Native Healing Center, when I first started, my role was really working with youth, doing life skills program with a really strong cultural component. And so it was holistic. So if we look at the medicine wheel, we look at the mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional piece, and trying to bring in programming that covered all of this. So as Cree, we would say Nihiao, which is four bodies. There's 4 parts to who we are. So how do we honor that? How do we instill this in our young people? So for years, we had relied upon Canadian Heritage. So they had offered a lot of dollars. Back then, there was a lot of dollars to do programming, particularly around Indigenous young people. So for about 5 years, we had really relied on this money. And it was really good partnership and able to build community and able to be able to instill teaching in our young people and provide that kind of mentorship. And then as it went along, eventually the money became less and less. And then eventually it became, well, we need you to do a program like this. So they were basically telling us how we needed to do programming, and that didn't seem to really work for us. So I was in the midst of writing my final proposal, and then I thought, we just can't go in this direction, because this is not really where we are. We needed to look at the capacity within our own organization. So we kind of put that on halt. We kind of put that partnership on halt. So we just took a moment and we looked at our own capacity, right? If we wanted to be an organization that was strong and that was vibrant and was working with the community in a good way, and that didn't depend on money to do this, well, we needed to look at ourselves first. So then that caused me to look a little bit deeper in myself. Well, what are some of the things that I like to do? What are the things that I'm good at? And I happen to be really passionate about fitness, really passionate about moving and activity. And so I thought, well, let's look at doing something like this. So I actually, from that point, realized, well, I need to get educated a little bit more if I'm going to lead our young people, lead our community. So I got certified in being a trainer. And so that really changed the shape of our organization. So again, we were connecting with culture and our young people and bringing in all these really good teachings. So this is actually in this studio. So I took this picture. So it's our medicines. So this is fungus, something that we would smudge with. And for me, it was an opportunity of collaborating our organization with physical fitness and activity. And how do we do this? So looking at our community, I really saw this space, this need for our people. If I wanted to get our people active and well in this one area, how can we do that if we don't have space? If we can't get people through the doors? So we created a partnership with YMCA. And so we were able to get our young people downtown into the gym and just giving them a chance, giving them an opportunity to come together as community. It's a really scary thing going into new ground when you have to go there yourself. But now we're going as a community, as our own little posse, right? And we were able to connect with a community organization that was a barrier in their minds before. So we kind of were able to bring down walls. And that really started with conversation and dialogue. And how do we do this? And it was a really great partnership. So this partnership went on for years. And so from there, I thought, well, no, I really like that our young people are accessing these services here in Edmonton. But how do we take it a step further? How do we create an actual space for our young people to feel safe? And not just our young people, but for our Indigenous people to feel safe. So we created this, so it's a dream. So if you were to come into the studio, so we actually have a fitness studio, and I bought these words because for me, this was a dream come true. So we created this space. And so this was years and years in the making, but it was, again, collaboration. It was talking with different community organizations, different partnerships, and how do we create this space? So people had committed some money, and so it took a couple of years, but we've been up and running for about 5-6 years now. So we have our own fitness space, a place in which our people can come together. But it's not just about our people. We're in this journey together as all human beings, as the human race. So for me, I see it very much as this opportunity to bring all people together, to share stories, to share relationship, to make that connection with one another. So it's really been a delight for me to have this community come together and share this space through physical activity. So this is a picture of Lisa and her daughter, Colby. So Colby started coming with her mom when she was just, she looks tiny here, but when they first started coming, I think she was 1.5 years old. So she was just little. And so this reminds me of my relationship with my mom and the role model and the fire and the teachings that she put in my life, and she planted these seeds. And we've created this opportunity in this space for our young people to be able to role model to their children. So if she comes every week with her mom 2 or 3 times a week, she'll come Zumba, we have battle ropes, so she battle ropes sometimes, and she'll come do yoga. So again, this is about community. It's about creating this space and this opportunity for our people. So this is Chris. She's on the battle ropes. When she first walked through the studio, she was scared out of her mind. You know, he talked about change. Change is hard. When you're thinking about exercise or fitness or, say, losing weight, right? That's a process that needs to happen here. So when she walked through the doors, she was really, really scared. And that was the very first thing she said. I was a stranger to her. And she said, I am so scared to be here. But I did it. So she's been coming for a couple of years now. And then, So this is Sacred, and her mom and I met again through the fitness and have been part of each other's lives. She's now in a Head Start program, and she's just engaged. She's just, so whenever she comes to the studio, she'll find a piece of equipment. She'll just be engaged and be open and willing. And again, it's really creating this space for the people. So this is one of the things I do. I'm not much of a Zumba-er, but the ladies were like, we want to dance. I'm more of a boot camp, kickboxing, and they're like, we want to dance. And so I went and took my training in Zumba. And so in this picture, this was after one of the classes. But physical fitness, being active, moving, using this gift that Creator has given to us to be engaged, not just for ourselves, but to be with community. So there's this sense of belonging that is being created, which is so important. And then some yoga. Oh, that's another picture of Colby when she was just little too. So it's been an honor to be able to see how this has unfolded. But one of the challenges was early on, right? When I'd host classes or have classes or invite people, there'd be 2 or 3. It was very, very humble beginnings. I had this idea. I had this dream. I didn't know how it was going to shape out. I didn't know the whys or the when or the where. But we just kept going. We didn't give up. If we would have given up in the first year of doing the fitness and bringing this activity alive in our programming, right, this would have not happened. One of my greatest joys, I think up until this point, was training with 20 of our women to do the half marathon last year here in Edmonton. So there's 20 of us ladies who trained and then finished this half marathon. Women who this was not normal for them to go out and train for 12 weeks. This is not imaginable. This wasn't ever in their mind or thought, a year and a half ago, but here they are. So they're proving to themselves that they are capable, that they're strong, that they belong to this community. So to say that we've built this really good community around fitness and physical activity, but it was kind of out of the box. It was out of like, what, really, are we gonna do this? Let's do this. So it was a commitment to the dream. It was a commitment to the desire to want to see healthier people and giving this opportunity for the community and bridging that gap. So it's been gorgeous, but we have to also acknowledge the collaborations that we've had of Aboriginal Women's Professional Association, the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women, YMCA, all of that, all of those relationships really helped create this foundation, this dream. So it wasn't just us at Edmonton Native Healing Center or Esqueo Health and Wellness or even my dream. It was really community that came together to help shape this and hold this dream for community. So we need to continue to mentor our young people and hold them up and encourage them and let them dream big and dream high. Because if it wasn't for my boss and my crazy ideas that I have, right? If it wasn't for him and giving me the leadership and allowing me to dream big, this wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't be able to be together as community in our studio, Zumba, yoga, walk half marathons, and be together. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Hi.
Thank you, that was awesome. Adrian Sprecher. Sorry. Northern Lights Public Schools.
Hello, everyone. This is new to me. Usually I talk to teachers, but this is great. I get to a new audience. So part of my passion is early childhood, and part of this project was totally multisectoral collaboration to bring something that all of my Lac La Biche Coalition members were passionate about to bring forward. So Greater Lac La Biche Child Coalition is something that has been funded by early childhood coalitions. Those of you that are not aware of early childhood coalitions, they are groups of people that get together and take a look at the different things we can offer young people in our community around 5 areas of development and growth. So this is a bit of our journey on our special publication that we just released in November on National Child's Day called We Can Grow Physical Health and Well-Being. So a little bit of a story on how we got there. So for some of you that may or may not be familiar with the early development instrument, in education, we were asked about 10 years ago to start collecting data around readiness for school. So when we took a look at our results initially, the first project was through ECMAP, and we created a group that got together that was multisectoral. It included such partners as Alberta Health Services, the schools, Northern Lights Public Schools, as well as our community partners such as AHCS, ParentLink, and anybody, any family member, anybody that was interested, grandparents as well as parents. And one of the things we did take a look at is data. Initially, our ECMAP data that we looked at really had some issues that we really had high concerns about. And through that data, a lot of different organizations were created throughout the community of Lac La Biche, particularly around physical health and well-being. And I'll share a bit of that adventure in just a moment. I was fortunate as being part of the school and having the opportunity to talk with other partners in the area around early childhood and growth. I kind of had a heads up when we did our second set of data that was released to the schools in April 2017. I had the sense that we were really struggling in the area of physical health and well-being, and we had noted that earlier in our first initial data set from ECMAP. That was one of our really concern areas, and we really felt that we still had lots of concerns and needs around that area. So with that being said, we took a look at our data, and we actually recently released our December 2017 data. Alberta Health Services compiled it around the EDI that was collected in April 2017. Sorry, in February, it was completed in February 2016, so those were the kids that we were looking at, but the actual data set was released just recently, December 2017. I do have the publication. It is available in the resource area if you want to take a look. If you take a look at the statistics, you'll notice that there is a difference between the statistic that's in the front page because it was the data that we had previously to the data that we just recently received, but our publication went out in November, so we didn't have the most recent data to put into that. So if you take a look at our community map, you'll see Lac La Biche on the left side and Alberta and how it's developing on the right side. And you'll see that we have a lot of work to do in our coalition. Our physical health and well-being numbers went to about 43.5% of our kids are developing averagely. But we have 11.5% that are presenting at risk, as well as 45% that are extremely at risk. So if you add that up, it's a big piece of the pie that we are trying to help our kids, if you compare it to Alberta, get more healthy through physical health and well-being. Our second area was communication, social competence, emotional maturity, and language and cognitive development. So the data was a bit of a surprise. We had hoped with all the work that we had done over the years in physical health and well-being that we would see a decrease, and unfortunately we did not. We're still continuing to champion that cause, but we weren't really shocked because we knew in our community, talking interagency, that our program unit funding in education, our stats were going way high. We had doubled our needs within 5 years as being in this role, as well as talking to some of the Alberta Health Services on how they were their referrals were coming out the roof and they were trying to get to all the kids and families that needed services. So the importance of this data was that we had shared data that we could work together with and actually look at the different domains of early childhood. So with that, we came up with a plan. We decided that we wanted to create a fabulous publication that was not only for children, but for parents. Even though we are trying to affect our young children, we wanted to make sure that we could also educate parents, but not in a preachy kind of way, in a fun kind of way. So we decided to have a photo contest where we invited our community to participate in giving us photos, so around the areas of physical health and well-being. So our areas that we asked for were things of sliding, building, active play, riding, brushing teeth, hair, bedtime routines, buttoning, zippering, dressing, putting on shoes, coats, clothing, crafting, gluing, indoor play, cutting, drawing, baking, cooking, going on a picnic, and kid chores. And you know what? We were shocked. At first we were worried we weren't going to get any pictures. We had an amazing response. And again, if you look at strength-based in a community, looking at all the things that are going right and all these families that were willing to share pictures of activity with us were fascinating. So we had lots of strength within the pictures in our families, and so now we could tackle some of the things that we needed to work on. It took a community to build this resource. So one of the things that we really had to work on is we did get some funds through early childhood coalitions and provincial government, but it wasn't enough to create our publication. And we knew it had to go more than just funding. We had to get the community engaged. So how did we pay for it, or how did we create it? Well, of course, volunteers from our community. So we had Active Kids Society, who was formerly the Vera Welsh Playground Committee, who built a $500,000 playground for our community that was accessible for our school playground at Vera and Welsh, because as you know, once you have a school and a playground, it's no longer funded. It's a parents' and community's responsibility to upkeep a playground. So our playground was about 20 years old, and we needed to change out the playground. So it took a community and a village. So that's how Active Kids Society was formed. After they created the playground, they realized they needed to do more, and they had used some of the EDI data to help them support, and they really became advocates of physical health and well-being. And as we got going, the Physical Literacy and Youth Society was trying to create a niche in Lac La Biche. So we decided that because we both had similar mandates, we combined and we became one actual society. And I am also, my many hats, I also am I'm the chair for Active Kids in Play. So I'm really proud of that. But sometimes the things that you volunteer in can connect to other things. So we also had somebody from Lac La Biche Soccer who was part of our Active Kids Society. And she said, well, hey, we have a European coach. If you guys are doing the launch of your book, we'd volunteer our coach, and then they can do some dribbling skills with kids. On top of that, our teenagers would love to participate and give back to the community. So when we launched this at National Child's Day, we had lots of activities and lots of partners that came out to join us. In Canada, fabulous Lac La Biche chapter that we have, we're all grandparents, and they said, hey, if you want families to come out, you better feed them. We'll cook you breakfast. Why don't we cook breakfast, and then you'll have families come out for food, and then they'll come and join your book, because this book is a great idea. And of course, AHCS helped us along the way and made sure that we could connect with other partners in our Lac La Biche community. And it actually allowed us to connect with the mayor and made sure that the mayor made our kids a priority and knew this data and knew what our statistics looked like in our community. So he actually came out and declared National Child's Day for us this year. We also had the Lac La Biche Post, who decided to who actually created our publication, and he donated his time to create the publication. So we only had to pay for printing. He actually did all the publication for free. And then, of course, Parent Link, Lac La Biche County, Northern Lights, Vera Welsh, and Alberta Health Services worked together to pick, there were people from our community that came together to help write the book. So we could not have created it without that multi-sectoral collaboration and working together. So this is an example of our launch of our book for National Child's Day. And you'll take a look, our strength is in community. We wanted to make sure that we had some fun events that we would bring families out. So again, starting with a wonderful breakfast. Our wonderful grandparents from our kinsmen created breakfast. So kids got to enjoy a healthy meal with their families. We made sure that it was not, it was buffet style, so kids had to serve themselves so that they would also pick up some skills. But we wanted families to eat together, so we made sure there was time embedded where they all got to be at tables and have a chance to eat together. Then we also had different things that the different members could come and pick up. So on top of our actual book, we had things like tambourines, things like balls that the kids could get, as well as outside activities, so pails and shovels and things like that. On top of that, our entertainment was based around social being and health. So we had Steve Harmer, who talks about building skills and independence with young kids. So he was our magician, but he also had a really good message to share. And again, just celebrating. So we brought in some kids' entertainment, Rattle and Strum, which brought the families to Lac La Biche that day. And so when we think about taking a look at how to build a project, there's so many people in the community that have the same interests as us. We just have to look hard and work together to find them. Our next project will be the next area or domain that we felt we had the need for. And so our next area will be communication. We do plan on creating a book for all 5 domains within our community, and will continue to get the help of all of our community citizens to share pictures and to join us and to celebrate kids and celebrate families. But we already are thinking about who would we need to get involved if we're looking at communication as the area. And it may be some of the same partners, but there may be different partners. So for example, Rotary is one who likes to do international projects, but also loves literacy projects. So through that, we are able to maybe look at some new partnerships. I do, if you are interested in our publication, there are about 50 copies in the back, and you can feel free. They are focused. We wanted to look at 2 things, a story for kids, but tips for parents at the same time. So hopefully you will enjoy it and take a look at it, and thank you.
And yes, please look at that publication. It is amazing and quite well done. So kudos to that community. So our last presenter, Kathleen Waxer from the Municipality of Jasper, come on up. And then we will have a few minutes for questions after.
Always a bit tough to be the last. I have lived in Jasper for 38 years. And many of you may have been to Jasper. Jasper is a small community of about 5,000 people. And perhaps from outside point of view, it may look like it's a transient community, but in fact, there's a very solid community of people who live there and consider it home and who are active in the community. About 33 years ago, I accepted the role of Director of Community of FCSS in Jasper. And one of the parts of that role was to was to chair the Interagency Council. And what I saw at the Interagency Council, it had started long before I came, but monthly people got together and each person went around the table and handed out brochures or talked a little bit sometimes about issues and trends that they were seeing. And then everyone would say, "Oh dear, that's too bad. I hate to see that that's happening," and went on to the next. And at about the same time, I was reading quite a bit of information about population health, and it struck me that we were kind of approaching this wrong. We're approaching it all from such a siloed point of view. And so I had an idea of how we could transform that. So starting about 24 years ago, we started enacting some pretty profound change, and which was to change the way we came together as a community to discuss the issues that we were faced as a community with. And so created what's now known as the Jasper Community Team Society, the Jasper Community Team. And so it was kind of inspired by a quote I had read once, that services have to grow out of the character and life of the community in which they are embedded. Family support needs rarely fit the arbitrary boundaries of categorical programs, and the heart of services is in caring relationships, not in rules and procedures. So with that in the background of my mind, I looked at how do we organize, and so we decided to organize around life stage, and so we developed what's called collaborative action teams for each life stage in the community. We have early childhood, middle childhood, youth and teens, young adults, because of course Jasper, with its tourism-driven industry, has a lot of young adults who come from all across Canada, and adults and seniors. So these are monthly meetings in which anyone in the community is invited to participate, along with the various sectors that would normally be at an interagency table. So for the past 20 years, we've had a monthly meeting of each of these life stages, discussing the emerging issues and coming up with collaborative ideas for how to tackle them. We also have what's called the Jasper Community Team, and that's when the members of all those collaborative action teams, as well, along with anybody else who wants to participate, which is the big picture, and we bring in speakers and talk about the big picture issues, for instance, poverty, immigration, things like that. And by having those discussions and those education sessions, we find that it informs the conversation at the community level. So together, the people worked to tackle all of these problems. So we've had a 20-year history of these people working in these different systems and coming together, furthering the principles of inclusion and diversity. So, sorry, the next slide. One of the things we had to do then was to pull together what we formed a not-for-profit charity, which is the Jasper Community Team Society, and it acts as a body to collect funds, whether it's through pooled resources or whether it's applying for special grants, and so that to activate the work that the people have done to activate the ideas that have come together at the collaborative action teams. So we have that society has existed for a long time, and it has allowed the Community Team Society and Jasper as a community to work in collaboration and not in silos now for a full 20 years. And we've had many wonderful opportunities that have emerged from that. I think the most important thing that I would talk about here that emerged, we call it the flagship program, and that's Community Outreach Services. Community Outreach Services began more than 20 years ago now to create a one-stop shop for human services in Jasper. What I saw as an FCSS director was that government provided services to Jasper on a proportional basis. So as a result, we had a 0.2 family school liaison worker, a 0.1 mental health person, a 0.3 kind of position. And it struck me that if we pooled those resources and created one, the other thing that I noticed was that people who were hired in those kinds of positions usually had the same kind of skill sets, and it required the same kind of person to fill those roles. So we created what's called Community Outreach Services, and it was built about 20 years ago from pooled funding. And It was pretty tenuous in the beginning. We had, I think, 3 or 4 outreach workers. We now have 6 full-time outreach workers, all with permanent positions. And I think I remember we started out with probably a 6-month term, and over time it's become very normalized. So outreach services was a made in Jasper solution for providing services that would be organized around how the community works. So outreach workers are each represent a different life stage, and they're expected to be specialists in early childhood, middle childhood, youth. And so they provide a service. It's open all day long, and people can come in. And one unexpected benefit was that we didn't realize that people often don't know what the reason they're coming in. They're just out of sorts. And what we found is they establish a relationship with outreach workers, have a cup of coffee, chat with other people in the place, and slowly the real point of what they wanted to come for emerges. So we do, the outreach workers do referral with engagement and are actively involved. Again, there's the pool of funds that pay for the outreach workers are made up of about 18 different sources. But we've been able to keep that going for 20 years. Other things that have emerged from the caring community, from the Jasper community team, have been a caring community fund. It's a fund that assists the outreach workers in helping their clients reach their optimal wellness, and it fills in gaps between what government services can do. The rules are that it can't do the same thing as a government program, because it's often easier to access the funds that way. But examples would be when we had a young family that had been surviving on making room cleaners. The husband had an opportunity to get a job, construction job, but they couldn't afford to buy the boots. We bought the boots for him so that he could take this new job, and as a result, he was able to move to have a better, higher income. And then I think the other important things I'd like to talk about is our community dinner program, and it runs every Sunday night in the multipurpose hall of the activity center, and a different group of people every week prepares the meal, and we serve between 300 and 600 people a week. And it's designed as a community building exercise. It's dinner by donation, so if you choose to provide something in the box, you may, and if not, there's no judgment or it's just along the line. There's a couple of boxes around the room where you can put the funds in. And sometimes the meals are hosted by people. We had the Jamaican community recently hosted dinners. Last week was Rotary. The week before that was the local food society. So it changes, but provides an amazing opportunity for people to break bread with their neighbors and make new connections. And in a community where there is a level of transiency, it's very nice for people to be able to make those connections. We've also had a community helpers program, a diversity project, which I can share a book. I brought that along with me, which has street banners and that with people proclaiming, holding a sign saying, one of them says, proud to be gay. One talks about, I'm a Syrian refugee and happy to be part of Jasper. We have a little girl who says, I'm proud of my freckles. There's a whole range of, we've really opened the whole concept of diversity. So I think I'd probably just end with a couple of sayings that I thought what you spoke about really resonated for me about the the difference in making that paradigm shift and working from a big picture rather than from within your silo is really difficult. And in retrospect, I realized it only happened because we really were willing to step out of that. So I have on my wall, "Leap and the net will appear." And because it was only because we weren't totally ready, but we did it. And as a result, we've been able to continue to evolve. And the other thing is a wonderful African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.
That was amazing, and it's interesting because right now, ARPA, we have some funding asked for projects in with Jasper and with Michelle at the Edmonton Native Healing Center. So even we're working ourselves to like walk that own talk, like walk our own talk, and work together with that organizational look. So thank you so much for those inspiring stories. And are there any questions from the floor? We do have a few moments.
Well, one of the things I like to say is we can't change people. We can change how they interact. And how we change that then opens up new ways of thinking and new mindsets about what's possible. Because we always get why. Why would we do that? Instead of asking why not. And we struggle with, I deal with NIMBY all the time, not in my backyard. And what we're trying to flip that is say, yeah, not in my backyard, that's not acceptable in my backyard. These things that we're turning our blind eyes to on the social side of things, and you're right, municipal leaders are being asked to do more today than they ever have in the past. So we can blame higher levels of government, blame whoever you want, but the reality is on the ground, that local government is seeing these things and is as close to the challenges as any other level of government, so it's only going to change when those municipal leaders are actually at the table as well.
Kathleen, or do you want to add, either of you at the end? Yeah.
Mike in my hand is dangerous.
Get that mic away from him. Remember, what's this?
I think I would just add that data is critical. So often when we look at our physical health and well-being stats, our early childhood statistics aren't entered into that field. And those are the kids that are going to be our future. Yeah. And I think so often we think of the adults in our community or the people that maybe vote for whoever is elected. But we have to remember too that these are our little guys that are going to be making our community survive and strong. And if we don't consider that, then we need to look at those stats too and what the trends are. And early childhood coalitions and creating that EDI data is really critical. And I do challenge everybody to take a look at your EDI and the community reports that just recently came out in December. You may be shocked about your community and the health of your kids. So take a look at that data, please.
Yeah, knowledge is power. A final question? One last. Oh, sorry, Kathleen.
So I did have one quick thing. Is that every year when I present the budget to council, I'm the only director who provides quite a big preamble to the budget.
Of why important?
I think it does require more of a teaching moment about what the investment is.
Great question. So the communities we're designing and building seems counter to some of the social challenges that we're talking about. And so my wife is in healthcare, and so she introduced me to this whole concept of a biological, psychological, and social aspect to the complete and holistic care of individuals. And so it got me thinking about how do we have that same conversation within how we design our communities. So how are we thinking about our communities from a biological and physical aspect so that we're treating that physical part of people. So ultimately it's how do we design for people instead of economy and infrastructure and tax assessments. And our spaces need to fit our biological needs. They need to fit our psychological needs. We don't talk about mental health enough. How is our communities challenging our mental health aspects? And then the social piece. How are we designing? We are designing ourselves in isolation. And our neighborhoods reflect that. The design of our communities reflect that. The cul-de-sacs reflect that. And we've created almost a social strata system that says the more you isolate yourself through these design elements, the better off you are. when it's kind of counterintuitive to what we're actually talking about as humans. So I think there's ways that through our community planning that we can introduce better design criteria and better standards that actually reflect what the people need, instead of going back to, well, pipes and pavement, you know, and who says that's the standard? Why does a road need to be that wide? Why do we need to land a 747 down Main Street of small towns? You know, or if we shrunk that and actually did more social space along that, are we better off? So I don't have a true answer other than continuing to challenge the status quo of why do we design and plan the way we do.
I remember hearing about 20 years ago, U of T professor Michael Radcliffe, who spoke about how change has to both from above and from grassroots, and it can't be done only one way. And I know one challenge I still am frustrated with is government continues to roll out programs and services in silos, but I feel proud in Jasper that we've been able to, from the grassroots level, design services that fit for our community and somehow convince government to force their programs into our model so that it makes sense. It is an exhausting process to continually fight for the right to have the services fit for your community.
So quickly, I was reminded of a story. I went to a First Nations community about 3 years ago, and I was facilitating a conversation around community and what does the community want. And actually, the people who landed at this meeting was all young people, so I hear about the youth. And the young people gathered around. We spent a whole day talking about and dreaming what is it that they want for their community, and drawing pictures and using Play-Doh. And at the end, it was one of the pieces was a playground. Fast forward 3 years later, what's going to happen this spring, this summer, right? So it started with conversation. It started with the young people. It started with the chief and council, or went next to chief and council, and some of the decision makers. And so now, 3 years later, it was a long process, but now they're going to have one of those dreams of coming to their community. And so again, I'm all about conversation and dialogue and digging deep and keeping it going and not giving up, and perseverance. So that's really exciting.
I just wanted to thank our panelists for today, for the conversations that they shared with us and the thoughts that they're going to inspire as we go back to our community.